To have passion in life is everything.
What's your Everest?
Oh,
Is it
yeah.
that 200-inch buck?
They just look so impressive when they're wide.
Especially running away.
Welcome to this week's episode of Eastmans Elevated.
It's like a think tank for outdoor activity.
Sounds exactly like my hunting. Just always thinking about it, always trying to evolve it and make it better.
Here's your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? I got a new solo episode here, so I wanted to sit down and record an episode all about elk hunting. And I'm getting pretty late in the season. I wanted to get it out a touch earlier, but it's September 20th now, and I just find that when I start hunting elk, like I'm thinking about elk hunting and elk theories, and I'm just in the zone of elk hunting, and so I can express it better to you guys. And so I thought I'd sit down. We got rained out this morning here. It was all fogged in up high on the mountains, and I'm actually just exhausted here. We got back last night, in the middle of the night after chasing this great 6-point bull. We didn't get him killed, but boy, we were close, and we heard him bugle just like 100 times last night. Satellite bulls coming around. It's just so thrilling. But I just wanted to sit down. Like, every species has this different specialized tactic of hunting them, and elk are definitely specialized as they're big animals. They're nomadic by nature. They travel a ton of country, and then hunting them during the rut. There's so many different tactics, but I just find that I hunt a lot of higher pressured elk. Like, it's tough for me to find elk that have never been hunted. I don't draw many premium tags. I hunt a lot of general units, and so I have this specialized way that I've learned how to hunt them over the last 20 years, and I just wanted to share some of my insights on it to you guys, and thoughts and theories on it and things. So that bull last night, man, were we close on that thing. And so we're hunting them right now in this early season. These elk tend to be high, and they're 8,000 to 10,000 feet right now, and we haven't really got the weather yet to push them down, or the feed hasn't burned off to push them down, and so we're hunting them way up high. The rut seems a little bit late this year, but it's starting to kick into full effect, and so we found that bull. We've been running on just a few hours of sleep each and every night. I need to camp up there on the mountain closer to where we're hunting them, but we've been running back and forth to the house, so that means leaving at about 3:34 in the morning, and then hunting them late. And we got home last night, I don't know, maybe 12 o'clock, something like that. So just running on a few hours of sleep, and the mountain was all fogged in this morning, and so we called it. We're going to go back in and look for that bull this evening, but we went in the morning and went in there and got to a good vantage point, and you locate these elk. I locate them by bugles a lot, and then I also locate them by my glass, and I just find that bugles is a great way to locate bulls, and especially in thicker cover, but you can only hear them so far away, and you got to kind of travel country. You got to get one to bugle or to answer back, and so I love getting to these master vantage points and looking around. That's what we did yesterday morning. Got to this really good master vantage point and glassed over, and we spotted this big herd of elk. There had to be 30, 40 cows in it, and then one just giant bull with a bunch of satellites around, and just a big 6-point long main beams, good tines, good mass. And so we decided that we were going to hunt this bull. We watched him from the vantage point in the morning, and we watched him. They kind of went into the cover, and then what these elk do is they travel to their bedding grounds, and then they start mingling around their bedding grounds and start feeding around those, and that bull will kind of rut a little bit, and they were out and about till maybe 9:30 or 10 before they finally bedded down. But there was just so many cows, and they were spread out all over the mountain. And we would have the thermals coming up, around 9:30 or 10, but there was just no approach. A lot of times I like to kind of coyote these herds and coyote the elk when I find them. And what I mean by that is just kind of move with them and then try to get them into their beds, move in close, and then when that bull's up checking his cows, that's where I'll capitalize and get a shot. And so a lot of times I like to do that, but yesterday there was just no chance at it, as there was just too many elk around, spread out all over the mountain. It was going to be really tough to get in on them, and so we opted to wait till evening. And then in the evening, once the shade starts to hit those hillsides, those thermals start to fall. And then you've got a downhill thermal. You can work down below them, getting close. And in my standard operation, like I don't call much at these things anymore, guys. You can call in a lot of satellite bulls, and you can call in herd bulls too. And I called elk for years and loved it. I love the interaction in it. And I need to incorporate it more. Just working ridge lines and bugling middle of the day and trying to get an answer or find a bull I can work. But, I've really found, like on these big herd bulls, that, the timing has to be absolutely perfect to call them in. And so, I've just kind of found that spot and stalking these things is more effective for me. Like I try to move in front of the herd. I can kind of cut them off, or I can move in close and let that bull go around. And it's still just as exciting and thrilling as you get to hear them rutting and hear them bugling. But, I've also believed that these bigger bulls that get 5, 6, 7 years old, like they've been called to, they know better, they don't come into calls as well. And so, in these areas that I hunt where they get pressured, I've just found that trying to focus on these herd bulls, these bigger bulls that are running these cows, that I have a better chance at killing them, to try to move in on them and stalk them or cut them off. And I've been extremely successful killing 6 points every year for the last 10 years or so doing it, or maybe even longer than that with my bow. And so, I've just found these tactics seem to work really well for me. And my buddies do the same thing. In fact, I'm starting to get text in. My cameraman, you guys probably heard that podcast I did with Logan Summers. He killed a really good bull the other day, sent me a picture of it, just this really nice 6 point, died in the river, just this beautiful picture of it. And so that was really cool. My buddy Ryan just killed a really nice bull. He said I could repost it. He doesn't have any social media. He's been on the podcast too. Just a great elk hunter. I talked to him this morning for about an hour just on different theories of these elk and where they're hanging and how to get on them. But he killed just a great bull. And same thing, he killed his by, cutting those elk off. He spotted this bull up with these cows up in the rocks, and there wasn't a very good approach. And eventually these elk worked down, and this bull actually separated from the cows. And so, he was just thinking quick on his feet, and he got in between the cows and the bull and was waiting for that bull to come back up. And while he did so, the wind got bad on the cows, and so the cows spooked off, which just enraged that bull, that his cows would take off. And so he came back up, and Ryan was right in the right spot and put a good arrow in him, and just a giant tall 6 point, and killed in the mountain. So good for him. So my buddies have kind of incorporated these same tactics into their hunting as well, and find that they're extremely successful on these herd bulls by doing it. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't have calls in your toolbox, shouldn't have cow calls or bugles, and I've called a lot of bulls in over the years. I just found that I called a lot of satellite bulls in. I called a lot of it was just really tough to call that herd bull away from his cows, or call that herd bull in as he just knew better, or he's preoccupied with his cows. And in some of these spots, like I've told you guys that I've been hunting elk in the breaks. I finally got out of there this season, and I mix and match the mountains, man. I love that mountain hunting for bulls. And that's really my niche too, is I'm in such good shape, and I'm, I train for these mountains, and I can get away from the people in the mountains. The elk are a little bit lower pressure than this, like the breaks country I hunt. It is extremely high pressure. Now, it's fun hunting, don't get me wrong. I can see a 6 point every morning and night over there, and I know I can go over for a weekend and find a 6 point bull. But it is exclusively spot and stalking. Like, nobody is calling elk over there just because they are so high pressured. They give the tag I was getting there for a while, they're giving out 1,800 tags. So there's 1,800 bow hunters in this unit hunting these elk. And so every elk you run into has probably been chased a time or two by hunters. And it's all this just broken open country. It's fairly open. Now, I like hunting elk in open country. I feel like if I can see them, I can shoot them. But they are extremely high pressured in there, and it's part of the reason why I'm getting out of there. There was a lot of good bulls, a lot of 6 points, mature bulls, but those bigger ones, you just see one that you want to harvest, and they're just really tough to get in on. Like you don't have a very high percentage chance of killing them just because they're so on edge and they're so looking for humans sneaking up and on them. And so I just decided to go for some different units this year. I'm hunting around my home range, and then I've got this tag that allows me to hunt a bunch of different units, a bunch of just great mountain ranges. And so I'm just trying it out, seeing how it's going to go here, and kind of hunting elk, in these different places. Like I like to explore too, and I like mountain elk, and this has a bunch of mountain ranges that I can hunt, and really good bulls come out of them. In fact, I went the second weekend on kind of a scouting trip, and just to look at some elk, and man, I found a giant over in one of these units. He had 3 eye guards on one side and a split 4, and just heavy and dark horn. What a bull. And he was chasing his cows back in, and I tried to get in front of the herd, and I heard him bugling, and then I think he just got by me, and I kind of worked up the ridge. We could have shot a couple other 6 points that day. I had one at 63, and then I had one at 45 that was like a 310, 315 bull. My buddy Dan was with me, and he would have shot it. I just couldn't tell him if it was a 5 or a 6 point. I just saw him in the brush about 45 yards, and he was already on to us and knew we were there kind of staring in our direction. And could have shot him in the vitals. I just couldn't tell what kind of bull he was. And, of course, then he spooked off, and he was that 310, 315 we had seen in the morning or whatever. But, God, that elk hunt is just so fun. I'm just so hooked on it. I just want to kill a really good bull this year, and it's just trying to find the time right now. Man, I'm so busy and burned a lot of my vacation time, and we're trying to finish out this house right now, and it's just super busy. And then hunting with buddies too. I've got a couple of the Hawaii guys with me. They're staying at the house here, and so I'm hunting really hard with those guys, trying to help them get a bull. And we got a third Hawaii buddy, my buddy Robin, showing up here, and so we're going to try to record some good podcasts on it. But yeah, it's just going to be tough to find the time. I'm going to be kind of a weekend warrior, and then hopefully I can kind of get out and hunt them for myself here coming into October or whatever, and see if I can't turn up a good bull and get an arrow in them. But I just love elk hunting. I think I got to dedicate more of my vacation time next year to hunting these elk. They're so fun. But elk are tough. They're specialized. So as I get into my elk tactics and telling you guys all my hunts and what I had, did I finish the story about the bull last night? So that bull last night, he came out and he was feeding in this pocket, and he's feeding with his cows. And so we waited for it to get late. The thermals were coming downhill. We kept checking the thermals, and then we just started stalking on this bull. He's just this giant, big 6 point, and he must have bugled 100 times last night. He's just screaming, and he had that deep roar to him. It's just awesome to hear and move in on. And so started moving below him, and he was in this pocket meadow. And if he would have stayed there, I think we would have killed him, but just crept in. And gosh, when you're creeping in on these things, when you start getting close, you start slowing down, and then it's really taking a look around you and catching these elk. And we had multiple elk. We'd catch up above us, catch a cow here or a cow there, where we'd kind of adjust our stalk, or we'd have to freeze for a little bit. And then at one point, we hop over the ridge, and we had this bull inside 100 yards, but he had worked out of that open stuff and worked into this timbered ridge. And so he was kind of tough to get on in this timbered ridge, but we couldn't see into it. It was fairly thick. He had moved into it, and he was moving his cows from right to left, and he was just right there. And then we had a bunch of elk show up to our left with another bull come over the ridge, and so we had to freeze forever and freeze for like maybe 15 minutes or so, and that gave that bull a chance to kind of move off and over the ridge, and we started running out of light, and we had to call it. But we left the bull. We never spooked any. None ever saw us. None ever caught our wind, and there's a bunch of elk in there. And so this morning it was fogged in. We couldn't see anything, which, you can definitely hunt bulls in the fog, where you can creep in and get a little closer and play their bugles. But we opted to go in tonight. I do like hunting them at night with those downhill thermals. Like, so much of the challenge of hunting elk is the wind. Challenge of hunting any animal, really. So I'm just really trying to I tell you guys about this higher understanding of the winds, the thermals and the directionals and how it's pulling. And then at every elevation on the mountain, the wind's doing something different, it seems, but it's just trying to understand it better, how the wind's pulling through these canyons, how the wind's hitting the faces and where it's going from there. When the thermals change, when the sun comes up in the morning and they start swapping around, like you have really good winds early in the morning for about the first hour as everything's shaded, the wind's coming downhill, like you got a good thermal. And then as the sun starts to hit the valley floor and warm it up, you start to get these warm thermal airs that start to rise up these canyons and rise up these walls. And so then you have an uphill thermal as long as it stays sunny throughout the day. If you get any storms that come in, it'll cloud it over, cool the air, and it'll drop. But those mountain winds are just so tough. And then I really like the evening. I like, that usually the directionals have come up a little bit in the afternoon, evening, and so you've got good directionals. And then in the evening, as the shade starts hitting these canyons, that air starts to cool and starts to fall down, and you got this steady downhill thermal for the last hour or two at night, depending on how the sun hits the mountain and how it's positioned in that. But just really trying to play these winds is just everything with these elk. And whether you're calling or whether you're stalking or moving on the herd, like all of these tactics, I talk about how, I believe spot and stalking is, bigger bulls, but people call in big bulls every year. Like it's just, it's whatever suits you too. And you should have all these tools in your toolbox, but all of these things, they all relate to hunting elk. Like even my spot and stalk tactics for calling bulls is great tactics as, you don't want to just call to these elk and chase them and think you're going to call in this bull. Like the way to call them is to locate them first, and then to move in and try to creep in inside 200 yards or inside 100 yards, and then give a bugler a cow call where that bull will come check you out. And so all of these tactics apply for whether you're calling or whether you're spot and stalking. And I really need to call a little bit more. As I say, for the last 10 years, I haven't even carried a call in my pocket. Like I have gone exclusively to spot and stalking. And a lot of it too is hunting that breaks country where they just don't call. And, I had these encounters where I was finding these big bulls, even in the mountains, where this is what kind of made up my mind is I would find these bulls in these mountains, and I travel miles and miles, as elk are nomadic and you just got to cover country to locate them. But I would find these elk in these pockets, and then I'd set up and try to make a call at him, and he'd grab all his cows and take off. Like those herd bulls just know better, it seems like sometimes. But you catch that herd bull in the right mood, you get in close, you make the right sounds, whether it's cows or a bull, and you kind of figure out like what he's reacting to, what's making him hot, what's firing him up, is it a bugle? Will he answer you back? Is he, and then as he starts to answer you back and you build this, kind of back and forth with him, then to cut him off and really torque him off. Or like usually if you can get within a couple 100 yards and make that call, it's either going to happen or it's not. He's either going to come rushing in or, he's going to gather up his cows and go away. But I mean, it's probably the same odds spotting and stalking or close to, you don't get every one. Just like last night, we didn't kill that bull, but we never let them know we were there, as calling kind of lets them know you're there and puts them on edge. Like we just let these elk feed. And a lot of times that works out for me. But what I like to do is, I like to hunt elk on their feet. I like to hunt them in the morning or in the evening. They just bed in such thick cover that they're not like a mule deer where you can get an exact position on his bed. And the only exception to that is like when I talk about coyoting the herd, is just kind of moving with the herd and keeping eyes on them and hearing them. And then you kind of work out, and like, remember me telling you guys that they work to their bed, and then they kind of mingle around their bedroom in there, and they'll kind of feed around, the bull will kind of rut. And that's a really good chance to capitalize on them if you can get a good wind, is to coyote them to their bed where they're not just moving so much. Elk like to move, and so like chasing elk from behind, it's tough to catch them. But if you can just keep with them and then kind of put them in a bed and see them in there, then you can kind of creep in and get in close and wait for that bull to kind of move around. And I hunt elk more aggressively, but I still like to let those elk make the last move, the last mistake. I like to let them get up and check their cows and move into range of me, or get in front of where they'll be feeding out at night and let them kind of feed out to me. And so I still like to let that bull make that last move and be patient in the end. But I do hunt them a little bit more aggressively. So I guess oops, left my phone on. That's typical podcasting here. Let me pause this real quick. All right, sorry about that, guys. Trying to wear multiple hats and field construction calls and the whole deal here this morning, as it is middle of the week, morning time. So, trying to do that and hunt and podcast and everything at the same time. But it's all going to work out. Man, I just love doing this podcast, and I love sharing the information with you guys. And construction really pays my bills, and then I love to hunt. Just the more time I can get, the better. But on locating elk, so that's the deal. Is these animals are so nomadic in these ranges, or any elk country, it seems like. There's good elk features within it, but that doesn't mean the elk are always there. Like, you could find the best elk basin, in the whole mountain range, but those elk will be there at certain times, but they're not there all the time. So if that makes sense, like, you find good elk features and good elk habitat, but that doesn't always mean that there's elk in it. You have to time it right. And so what you have to do, these elk, they're nomadic as they move from feeding feature to feeding feature, and then they kind of adjust to their surroundings, and they'll bed in certain places in there. They'll get their water in certain places, and then they just continue to travel as well. So when I'm locating elk is one of the biggest deals when you're hunting elk. You have to find them before you can kill them. So you have to locate them, and because you have these giant mountain ranges, and there's just not elk in every single drainage. It doesn't seem like, it seems like they're in certain spots, and then they kind of move in these. Even these mountain ranges that have really good elk populations, like the ones I'm hunting around home here, it's historic good elk hunting. But you can go a lot of places where elk aren't, and that's always how elk hunting has been for me. And whether that's bow season, which I'm been a bow exclusive for the last 12 years or so, but I really like hunting them during rifle too, with family and friends, and then it taught me a lot about hunting elk and elk habits and behavior, and same thing when you're hunting shed bulls. They're just not in every spot. And so anyways, when I'm trying to locate elk, like, that's one of the biggest parts of elk hunting. And so what I like to do is I like to cover country, and I go, I choose a drainage, and I work up that drainage, and I don't set a big base camp up, like maybe if you're hunting some national forest where you can set up a wall tent down low and then hunt different drainages every day, like that could work. But as far as camping in the backcountry, very rarely can you keep into elk for 7 to 10 days back there. It seems like I would choose these drainages while I'm young and have these big goals and ambitions of getting in there and hunting elk for 7 to 10 days. And what ends up happening is you're into elk for about 3 days, and then they move on to other country. And so, if you are going to go into the backcountry and set up a backcountry camp, I like to be mobile. I think the key with elk is being mobile. And so, I like to go up a different drainage dang near every day. And so I'll just work into these drainages. And, I don't need to really call to locate elk. I find that elk, they'll bugle and rut on their own. And if you're the first person calling, like, I think it kind of lets them on to you, lets them know, that, hey, we're not calling real loud right now. And all of a sudden we've heard this bugle, and I know you can get answers back. And that is an effective way to locate elk, is to bugle off these ridge lines, get an answer, and then a bull is there. But what I find is that I just work up these drainages listening, and then I'll hear a bull, and then I can start to work in his direction, and I really want to get eyes on him. I really want to see him. And so, I'll travel up these different drainages looking for these bulls, and I do a lot of glassing. I love master vantage points. That's how we found that big bull yesterday, is I could just look on my map, on my topography, and we had seen a few cows in one spot, And so we just ended up on this master vantage that was at 10,000 feet, and I call it spinning the dial. When you get up and you can look 360 degrees around you and just cover so much country with your eyes, and you can look farther than you can hear. So you can look farther at elk long distances that you wouldn't hear calling. And so I find it's a real effective way to hunt them. The other thing I'll do is a lot of these drainages, this elk country, it doesn't lay out like muley country where you can always get a master vantage. A lot of times you're looking at a lot of cover and a lot of timber, and these elk, they need to feed on this meadow grass. And so, that's where you locate them morning and night. But not all this country lays out where you can have a master vantage point. So a lot of it is like what I like to call a moving vantage point. So you're working up these drainages, and you just start working ridge lines, or you're working bottoms, and you're just glassing every little opening you can see. And then you're listening for bulls to bugle, and you're just trying to locate them and cover country. And you got to cover country in that morning and evening is when they're calling and when they're moving and when they're in those feeding features. So that's prime time for me. And I do a lot of walking in the dark. In fact, we walked out in the dark last night because we were hunting that bull late. But in the mornings too, I'll hike an hour or two in the dark to make it to a good spot come daybreak. The first hour and last hour is so key because that is when these elk are out in those meadows. And then these meadows, they're out in them all night long. And also they're moving. You can find them. Elk are tough to locate in their beds because they bed in really thick cover. And they will get up throughout the day, but they're just really tough to spot in there and to locate in there. And sometimes you can find a bull bugling in the middle of the day that's fired up. And it's just a matter of covering that country. But most of the time, I want to cover the most country in that morning and in that evening. And so I'll do a lot of hiking in the dark. And then I'll just work up these drainages and work up these ridge lines, listening and looking and glassing, or like we were doing the other day on the master vantage point. The elk in these mountains, their habits around these mountains, they tend to, and this may be, specific to Montana or this area that I hunt, but our mountains, what these elk do is the start of the season, they're way up high. And I think this holds true to most places. But at the start of the season, these elk are way up high. A lot of the bulls are traveling, with other bulls or solo. They're starting to kind of hang out with the cows. And sometimes they'll get together and they'll kind of sort their stuff out where there's 100 elk and a few different bulls. And they're trying to sort all these cows out and figure out which bull is going to get which cow. Those are the parties. That's what you want to get into. What you're really looking for when you're elk hunting. It's great to locate a bull with some cows, but you really want to find where the party's at. You want to find where 100, 200 elk, multiple bulls are sorting out their stuff. And they'll do this in this early season. They also really do it in the late season as they group up and they're looking for second cycle estrus. And then even the middle of the season when these bulls have their cows, you'll find a bull with cows, but it's just elk like to be around other elk. So if you can find a group of cows with a bull, chances are is that there's other groups of cows with other bulls around that area or, in the drainages surrounding that drainage where you found that elk. And so elk like to be around other elk. So once you find, a bull, you can kind of look around the surrounding areas and find it. But what you really want is you want that party of elk. When you find that party of elk where there's multiple bulls and satellite bulls around, there's just elk around you. That's when it happens. That's when you kill a good one. So I'm always looking for that party of elk. And in that early season, it seems like they want to be up high, or it doesn't seem like it. They do, they want to, they're up in their summering grounds. They're up in the highest country they can find. And around here, right now, it's the 20th of September and they're still up high. They haven't got the weather yet and the food hasn't burned off. That's the key for them to move down. It's either the food burns off or they start getting snow that pressures them down, like an early snowstorm or whatever will push them down in elevation. But right now, we're finding all of these elk 8,000 to 10,000 feet in elevation. So we're really focused on this high country, and so you can do a lot of glassing up in this high country. It's like this alpine environment where you can glass a bunch, and as it gets later in the season, like any day now, I think we're supposed to get a snowstorm this weekend, it's going to push these elk down, and they're also going to start to go lower for good feed because their feed starts to burn off up high, and so they change locations. So start off up high in the early season, and then you're looking mid-hill. When you find elk, look for more elk. Look for in surrounding drainages, and then you're just looking for the party. When you can find the party, they're calling back and forth. Like it's just such a great time to kill a bull. And then in the late season, into October, these elk start to group up in big groups. And same thing with locating elk there. A lot of them around here, they start to move to the lower elevation, to the faces and that. And so you can find them. You can find them by, in my valley, you can glass from afar and look at a lot of different country on these faces and side hills and find them. And find where they're at and then work them. And then these bulls, it's like... The wind is just so key in playing these things. And we talked a little bit about morning and night and thermals and directionals, but it's just like constantly be paying attention to the wind. Be paying attention to the wind when you don't even have elk, just to see how it's affecting that hillside, how it's blowing against it, how it's blowing up that canyon. And I'm continuing to try to evolve my wind game as well as just getting in close. There's been more stalks and more calling setups busted by the wind than anything else out there. You probably heard the adage where you can fool their eyes, you can fool their ears, but you can't fool their nose. It's so true on elk. So really trying to play that wind, and then I'm just trying to get in close and let things happen, whether that's the evening, whether that's I coyote the herd and then try to get them, or like another great tactic is to see elk moving and where they're headed and try to get in front of them. If you can get in front of a moving herd of elk, then you have them just move right into you. You don't even have to close in on the stalk. You don't even have to make a sound. You just kind of get how they move through country, like look for saddles, how they move through hillsides, and you're trying to almost predict where they're headed before they head there, and so you can kind of get in front of them and work them that way. And a good way to get in front of the herd is to watch where they bed down for the day or watch the timber they disappear in, and then try to figure out where they're going to feed that night. Where's the good meadow grass? Are they going to continue on to the next feature? Are they going to come right back out in that meadow? And a lot of times your highest percentage is where they fed that morning and where they went into the timber is that they're going to come back out in that meadow at night. And so I'll try to play that meadow, and then you're just setting yourself up for a good win and let them feed right out at you. That works really well. But I just chasing elk and during the rut, those bugles, it's just so exciting and so thrilling. Like last night, hearing that bull bugle 100 times, man, was that just amazing. And satellite bulls around, and there's cows, and there's a small bull there, whatever the case is. It's just so fun. I love being in the mountains, but you're not gonna find them every day. Like you're gonna have to cover country. You're gonna have to find the population of elk, and you'll look at great elk habitat and not see elk in it. That's fine. They'll be there eventually, or maybe they were already there. Just log that in your mind that is good elk country. You'll see scrapes and tracks and sign, and I always pay attention to wallows. Wallows are a great sit in the middle of the day, as those elk, they have to water at least once a day, sometimes twice a day. And so water is real key for elk, and when you're hunting them early too, that alpine environment, you can almost predict where they're getting their water at, and so it's really good to key into that water source and to not hunt country that it's void of all water. That's where elk won't live on the top of the mountain like mule deer a lot of times, because they can't get their water there. So they need to be down just a level off the top of the peaks where they can get water day in, day out. And so it's really important to focus on water when you're hunting elk, and make sure there's water in the canyon you're hunting or up in that high country that you're looking at. And so you really want to focus in on that as well. But man, oh man, with a bow and arrow, it doesn't get much finer. They're just so big. So excited. So I just can't wait to continue to hunt them. I'm going to get these my Hawaii buddies on the podcast too. They're really good hunters, and they're good elk hunters. They've hunted a couple different states and chased these things around. And so we're going to keep theorizing and keep on these things, and hopefully we can go find this big 6-point we were on last night and get on them again here, as we didn't spook them or didn't chase them. And it's just fun. I went on so many of these adventure hunts early, for myself and shared them with buddies, but sure is nice to share the hunt with friends. And I had a really good hunt with my dad. It wasn't an elk hunt, it was a mule deer hunt where he drew that Wyoming high country tag, and he's never really hunted the high country with his rifle. And so, man, was it fun teaming up with him and getting back in there. Gosh, my dad's in good shape. I can only hope to be in that good a shape when I'm 59. He's just built for endurance, and he just loves to hunt and loves to get to the backcountry. And we got up there, and man, was it good hunting. I thought I had never hunted the rifle season in Wyoming. I had always hunted bow seasons, and so I know the country really well and where bucks hang out. And I even know where they go to in their secondary living. But I was a little worried about the pressure. Wyoming doesn't have anything for pressure, at least where I was, where we were hunting there. I mean, there were some guys around and things, but it's nothing like general season elk in Montana with a rifle. There's guys on every ridgeline. It's like the Orange Army, and so there really wasn't much pressure. We were able to get in there. Dad harvested a nice buck. He actually shot the wrong buck. He shot a nice buck, and he was really happy with the experience in the hunt. But man, were we sitting on a giant. We had spotted a good buck in the morning that kind of disappeared in a timber patch, and we went looking for him, and we kind of sat on his feeding feature, just hoping to catch him up for the day. And I looked down in the timber after sitting there for about 3 hours, and I spotted a really good buck down in the timber. I'm not sure if it's the same one. But really big backs, and he had a 6-inch inline, and he was all a 185, probably close to 190, heavy dark horns, already hard horned, and had him bedded there in the timber. And so we worked down. We got Dad within about just inside 300 yards, or right at 300 yards there, and couldn't really get any closer because we'd lose view of the feature. I mean, you can always get closer, right? I always hunt them with a bow or whatever, but where they were at, we were on a good vantage point. We had a great wind, and we were sitting right there, and it's right inside his effective range. And so we had bedded this buck. We saw him get back up and then feed in this little patch of timber. We couldn't see him, but we knew right where he was at. And we were waiting for him to get up, and we waited 2-3 hours. We've been hunting all day, and Dad had his shooting position all set up, just this lay down, perfect rest over the packs, back elbow down, waiting for this buck to come out and show himself. So anyways, we're sitting there, and we're just glassing this hillside and glassing the timber, and Dad all of a sudden says, "There he is, I got him." And he was actually behind his gun, looking around, like messing around with his shooting position, getting comfortable with things. And he goes, "There he is, I got him." And I said, "Dad, where's he at?" I couldn't see him. He wasn't coming out of the timber where I'd seen him. And all of a sudden I hear Dad, he doesn't answer me or tell me where that buck is or anything. He just boom, and he shoots, and I see that buck rolling down the hill. He was, maybe 100, 150 yards away from where we had seen him. I said, "Dad, was that the same buck?" He was quite a ways away. And Dad said, "Oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the same buck." Man, he rolled down that hill. He actually busted one of his horns rolling down that hill. It was so steep in this rock slide. We were able to kind of put it back on. I'm sure the taxidermist will be able to reattach the horn. It isn't that big a deal or anything, but it rolled down that steep face, saw him rolling down, and so we kind of high-fived, and I'm pretty psyched for Dad. He loves hunting mule deer, and to see him, backpack back into this backcountry, and we carried our camps on our back, and see him work so hard, climb elevation, and we probably glassed up 20 or more bucks, and he was really trying to shoot a nice one, his personal best. And we got up to, I think it's his second best mule deer he's ever shot, but it was not the big one that was laying down. We would have killed that big one too if we would have kept patient and just, bucks had no idea we were there. That bigger one would have got up. And I can see why he made the mistake. I mean, the buck is 28 inches wide, probably like a mid 160s buck, just a really nice buck. But it was not that big buck or whatever. But he was happy. Dad's got he's just got such a great attitude, and it was, he says, "Boy, I probably would have shot this buck anyways even if I did know the big one was in there. This is a nice buck." So he was completely psyched with it. And then I always love. Like, then we decided we were going to head out that night. It was afternoon, or it's getting evening, I guess. But so we boned out that buck and loaded him up in the packs, and started to make our way out. I had made a trek on the map how we were going to get out of there, and it got pretty steep and pretty gnarly. There was one point we were on these cliff faces where I had to make my way through, and Dad just didn't feel comfortable. I had to drop my pack and then come back across it, grab his pack and his rifle and take it across, and then it was just so steep, that I had to kind of get below him and hold his footholds as he kind of made his way. But I love the adventure of hunting, and so the more adventure I get out of hunting, the more I enjoy it. And I've almost like learned over the years, like the gnarlier things get, or the tougher the hike is, the tougher the pack out, just the bigger the smile on my face. I love working hard for critters and animals. And so, working through this steep country, and then it's getting dark and there's no trail. We're just through all this downfall timber and climbing elevation with his buck. And my dad got pretty tuckered. He was pretty worn out. He was definitely getting to the end of his rope. We were having to take breaks here and there, and we could have set up our camp and just camped another night, but we just kept taking it easy, and I kept going at this pace, and we'd take breaks. But I'm telling you, for 59, he is in great shape. We put our own limitations on ourselves, and definitely as we get older, it gets tougher. But it's really nice to see my dad in such good shape and work so hard to get this buck, and then be so proud of it too. And just really fun to share a hunt, just me and him in the backcountry, look over a bunch of bucks, and then have him harvest a really nice one. I was pumped for him. So that was fun. I just been hunting a lot with friends and family. I did my hunts there in the early season, and I'm gonna hunt elk here. I'm gonna be a little bit later when I get to hunt elk. We're gonna try to film it, and granted, if I saw a great big bull and I was by myself, I'd probably run an arrow through him or whatever. And it's just like hunting big bulls means so much to me. And that's how I kind of learned how to hunt. I moved to Montana, and we had mule deer around, but the high country mule deer kind of came later to me, like traveling to different states and things. But I have always hunted elk and loved to hunt elk. It is the funnest thing. And so it's going to be really fun hunting with these Hawaii guys and trying to help them out. Robin got a nice bull last year, and Janus was close. He had some close calls on bulls, and I think he even had a miss or two under his belt. But he's all practice up this year. He's been shooting a bunch, and he's really looking for redemption. It would be Janus's first bull, and so we're really trying to get him into one and get him a shot at a bull. And so we're just gonna keep hunting him hard, and we're gonna go back into that spot tonight. But it's so fun, like friends and family just means so much to me. And I love hunting myself. I almost love hunting it with my buddies as much as anything, with my dad. And my family's coming up, my daughter's hunt's coming up. I can't wait to hunt with her. And I just love these shared experiences and laughing and having fun. And that was the hike last night too. The hike last night got grueling and brutal, and I had a huge smile on my face. And we're hunting deep in grizzly country too. It's just full of grizzlies. There's usually a tack or two every single year in there. Last night we were hiking out, and all of a sudden I could see these eyes in front of me. I was kind of leading the pack, and I could see these eyeballs, and I'm sure it was a deer or elk or something, but kind of puts you on the edge. But the sketchier it gets and the longer the hike, it was just this grueling hike out in the mountains from where we had got on these elk. We had to cross this big canyon, but I had so much fun sharing that with my buddies and that shared experience. And gosh, we were reliving it again this morning, and we'll be back in there again tonight, hopefully locate those bulls. So I really wanted to get out an elk hunting podcast and some of my thoughts and theories on it, as it is such specialized hunting for these things. For me, I hunt them a lot in their feeding features, and I don't hunt them in their beds a lot like I would hunt a mule deer, just because you can't locate them. They get in such thick cover and thick timber where they like to bed, and it's tough with all those eyes when you got a bull with a big group of cows. And when they're bedded, they're really listening for all sounds, and they're looking for all danger. But, if you got even 15 cows in there, 10 cows in there with a bull, you got 20 eyes you're trying to avoid, and they're just bedded in different places in there. And so a lot of times, I have crept into their bedroom before, and I've done okay with a good wind. Like I say, the key to hunting elk is a good wind, but it's just, you end up busting them out a lot. Where when you can see them out in the feature and they're feeding out in the feature, you can kind of keep track of them and use the cover to get in close. And so I really like hunting elk on their feet in their feeding feature. Like that's my MO. So that's what I'm looking for when I'm chasing bulls. But man, it's gonna be fun. It's fun. The rut is here. It's fun hearing those bugles last night, hearing them fired up, and I'm sure gonna locate some good bulls, and I'm gonna hunt some different mountain ranges. I'm hunting around home here, and then I told you guys I got that tag where I can hunt other mountain ranges, and they're new spots to me, and I wish I wish I would have got some more scouting in some of these mountain ranges, but I have done a lot of e-scouting or a lot of looking at maps and topography and places I need to get. And these elk too, like when you're looking for elk, like we're hunting one of these ranges that's got access roads in it that'll get you to 10,000 feet. And in a lot of the places I hunt are wilderness. It's just this spot has access roads, and it's really good elk hunting in there. And so you use these roads, but you just find these elk. They're in the roadless country. Elk like to be where they're not getting pressured. You know where elk are? Where humans aren't hunting them, And so you've got to look for these spots that are in between roads, or they got a big canyon in between you. And also, everybody knows how to use their glass nowadays. And so anything you can glass from a road, chances are you don't find many elk there. You got to really look for these spots that are tucked in and tucked away, secluded canyons, and look for where elk get pressured to. And elk are where humans aren't. Like, that's where I find elk. And so I'm constantly looking for these spots where elk are not. And that's how I find them. And same thing right now where we're hunting, where we got roads to access, but we're hiking deep into country where there are no roads. And then, after we start to find some elk in here, now I'm looking at the canyons that are close to that canyon that we can go in and grab a good vantage point or grab a ridge line and look at. But that's where you tend to find bulls. But okay, we did 45 minutes. I gotta get hunting here. I just wanted to get you guys out a solo elk podcast. I wish you guys the best hunting this year for elk season. I've already seen a bunch of bulls come through my feed. I know you guys are doing good, and some of you guys are harvesting some really nice 5s and 6s, and man, I'm really happy for you guys. Keep hunting hard, and hopefully you guys got some more days of field coming up. And I'll check in with you guys next week.